In this video, I'll answer your most common question. What's the one essential thing to do to prepare soil for the best growth before cultivating? The answer I'll give will help you regardless of your climate, soil or crops. Get ready for the revelation. In this video, I'm going to criticize some people who practice MSV permaculture and syntropic agriculture. Yes, because in these movements that I practice and that inspire me a lot, there are still people who, in my opinion, are missing something essential. All right, ready for all that? Hang on, here we go. So, what is the one thing you absolutely have to do to properly prepare your soil so that all your crops, whatever they are, grow well? So if you already know me, you know the answer, and if you don't know me, there's a good chance you'll be disappointed, because the answer is, it depends. And why? Why does it depend? Because all the techniques, everything you can do will vary depending on your context. And your context will be the climate you're in, your type of soil, whether it's more clay or more sandy. What do you want to grow? A vegetable garden, trees or an orchard, even for the same crop on identical soil and climate. Techniques vary by season, so you won't use them the same way each time. Don't leave the video yet. I'm still going to answer the question, or rather help you answer the question yourself actually, instead of just waiting for a ready-made answer. The key is to ask yourself the right questions as they guide your techniques and methods. We'll review these important questions shortly. I'll even give you some examples of techniques that will completely change depending on the context. But before that, I want to go back to something I mentioned in the introduction of the video. And yes, this is where I'm going to criticize some people who practice market gardening on living soil in permaculture or syntropic agriculture. Now, just to be clear, I'm not criticizing these approaches themselves. Personally, they've greatly inspired the way I work today. No, what I'm criticizing is more the somewhat extreme attitudes of some people who practice these methods. But what are you doing there? Hasn't anyone ever told you that soil should never be worked? Ouch, what are you doing with your bare soil there? Haven't you ever been told that soil should never be bare? It should always be mulched, always, yeah. Always mix your plants and avoid leaving empty spaces in your growing areas. Yeah, I won't sow carrots then. Well, you can see it, the common point in all these sentences. As soon as there's an always or a never running through them, they're extremists, and extremists aren't open to debate and don't move things forward. Actually, whenever someone tells you that you should always do this or never do that, it's either a beginner or someone who works in theory, just theory. You know, it's that wonderful country where we don't do anything, but we know everything works. By applying the same rule everywhere, we overlook the key factor, context, which should guide our choices. Otherwise, we'll end up applying the same solution to different situations, and that never works. People who really practice are always in the it depends mindset and adapt their approach. Well, if you want, here are some examples of practices that can change depending on the context. Can I use the straw bale for a moment? Sure, I'll bring it over. It'll take 5 minutes. Very nice man. He has some fixed ideas, but he's nice. As I was saying, do you want examples of practices that change based on context? Mulching is great in hot, dry summer weather, but in spring it attracts slugs. Mulching can be good, but it depends on the type of mulch. Sometimes it's better to remove it. For tall crops like tomatoes, mulching works well, but sowing carrots under mulch never works. So use mulch, but not always. And total no-till, yes, it's good in certain contexts. For long-term crops on continuously cultivated, clayey, compacted soils, without loosening the soil to create a good seedbed, you can't sow root vegetables or grow nice carrots. You need to do at least some work. The soil, actually, if you have a clayey soil that might get compacted, you can grow long-term perennial crops there, make a forest garden. Little by little, it will establish itself. Loosening and working your soil for a vegetable garden will quickly improve its fertility. Actually, it's this example that gave me the idea to make this video. I'll tell you a bit about the concrete example. Here, we're on Carol's land, which she has been working on for 3 years. It's a silty soil that's very rich because it's very silty but very silty, so it compacts easily. For me, this is the first year I'm working here. And this year I had some vegetable crops, certain vegetable crops that were very vigorous and grew very well. More than Carol's crops, in fact. She was a bit frustrated with some of her crops even though others did well. But for some crops the difference was obvious. And what is the difference? Carol, on her side, did a very superficial job. She just scratched a little where she did her planting. I used the broad fork throughout. deeply aerating the full width of all my beds. As a result, my areas were more fertile and my plants more vigorous because I did more thorough soil work. Well, just keep in mind that the difference was only noticeable on certain crops and that these differences are valid in this context with a very silty soil and annual crops, so always adapt what I say to the context. In this video, I'm not going to go into more detail about all the technical aspects really of soil preparation and mulching. I've already made quite a few videos about that. I'll add some links in the top right corner so you can check out a few videos, but I can't include them all. Go browse my channel, you'll find plenty of videos where I go into a lot of detail about the techniques. What I wanted to talk about here isn't necessarily the technique because that's not always the most important thing. But it's more about the context in which you'll apply these techniques. And now let's focus on what important things you need to know to really understand your context. And I'll give you here an example of questions you can ask yourself differently, or at least that you can ask me differently. And I'll take as an example a question, well, I mention it often, but it's a real question that I've actually been asked before. And the question is this: I planted an apricot tree, but it's not growing. Can you tell me why? I need more information to answer. In the comments, I often don't have time to ask all the needed questions before answering. However, you can still ask me your question this way. I live in such and such a place at such and such an altitude, so I have a rather warm, cold, humid, rainy or not rainy climate, and my soil is rather clayey, sandy, loamy, etc. Last spring I planted an apricot tree of a certain variety. We can go into that much detail, and this year we had a rather warm, dry, rainy summer and my apricot tree isn't growing. Can you tell me why? With that, I already have a lot more information, a lot more leads to figure out why that year that plant didn't grow at your place. Well, even though maybe we need even more questions to develop it a bit, but you get the idea. Then what might happen is that by looking for all this information, you'll probably get closer to the right answer on your own, which will help you even more. We could say that the climate, the weather, the region, and the altitude where you are will change, will modify things a little bit. The timing of your actions, your soil type, and the type of crop you want to grow will change the way you act, and in all the information you need to gather. The hardest part is learning your soil type. After that, everything else goes quickly. I made a video, I'll share the link above, where you'll find all the info to determine your soil type. And you should know that once you know your soil type, its texture, whether it's sandy, silty, clayey, etc. Well, once you know it, you'll know it for life because your soil's texture won't change. What will change is its structure, and it's the structure that you'll need to work on so that it's airy enough for your crops. But depending on your soil type, you won't act the same way to change this structure and to save you a bit of time. There is still one thing that works in almost every case, and that's adding organic matter so that your soil is more alive. This only doesn't apply if your soil is already rich in organic matter and very dark like old forest or vegetable garden soil. But in most cases, adding organic matter and making sure your soil is alive works. In almost every case, you'll need to know how to adjust this addition of organic matter depending on the crops you want to grow. But that's it. I won't go any further than that. Once again, in detail, well, with all this, you already have quite a bit of information to ask yourself the right questions. Once again, you can go search my channel to find plenty of videos on different techniques to apply to your situation, and you even have all the little bits of information to look for. So you can ask me questions that I can answer more effectively. I may have several questions after all this, but that's just how it is. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and share the video with others if you think it could help them. If you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel, which will let you stand out in the comments, and I'll be able to answer your questions first. I prioritize subscribers' questions since I get many and can't reply to all. You can support me financially on TP. There may be a link above if space allows. And thanks to everyone who will do it, who will support me, without whom I wouldn't be able to take the time to do all this. Alright, thank you all, and I'll see you very soon in the next video. Alright, you can take your straw back if you want. Goodbye. It's a little sweet. Did you forget your paper?